everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Fearcast. This is the podcast dedicated to OCD, anxiety, and anxiety spectrum disorders, and getting your life back. I'm your host, Kevin Foss, and I'm a licensed clinician specializing in OCD and anxiety disorders. Thank you all so much for joining me today. This is a question and answer based podcast. If you would like a question, or if you have a question about OCD and anxiety and would like it answered here on this podcast, go to fearcastpodcast.com and you can click on the submit a question link. And I will, and send me the message there. I will read it, consider it, and likely put it up on a future episode. You can also send me an audio question over at Instagram. You can find me over at Fearcast Podcast at Instagram. If you send me an audio question over there, and there's some instructions on my profile page there, it will shoot right to the top of the list and will be put up at the next available episode. So today's episode, I had Justin Hughes to talk about community within OCD, and I'm going to introduce him shortly. But I hope everybody is doing well over the holiday break. I know that this episode is coming out late just due to all sorts of craziness and scheduling and all that. But I hope this is a peaceful time, an enjoyable time. I know for some it can be a difficult time, but I hope for everybody out there listening, you are finding some peace and happiness and joy and hope that perhaps you're looking for. So I don't want to belabor too much time here at the very top. Let me just tell you a little bit about Justin, and we'll jump into the episode. So Justin Hughes is the owner of Dallas Counseling. He is a clinician, a writer, and is passionate about helping those impacted by OCD. He serves as the IOCDF's OCD and Faith Task Force and is the Dallas Ambassador for OCD Texas. Working with a diversity of clients, he is also dual trained in psychology and theology, regularly helping anybody to understand the interaction between faith and OCD, and most commonly with a Christian population. So I had a great time chatting with Justin, and you'll hear what we're going to talk about. We focus mainly on community and his work with community. And I do hope to have Justin on to talk a little bit more about his work with religious scrupulosity and some of that overlap between OCD and faith in future episodes. But I hope everybody enjoys this episode with Justin Hughes. So without further ado, here's my interview with Justin. All right, so welcome everybody to the Fearcast, and today I have with me Justin Hughes, who kindly decided to, or kindly agreed to, show up today to talk about OCD treatment, and also as we were talking a little bit beforehand, or before off air, talking about community and what community looks like within the context of treatment, how community can be used for treatment, and how perhaps you, the listener, can utilize your community for treatment. So first off, Justin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Kevin.
Yeah. Well, so you when I mentioned community, when we were talking about that, you got really, really excited about the idea of you in the audio medium. People can't see that he put up his hands with fists and started shaking and pumping in excitement. This is obviously something that gets you going. But tell us a little bit about what community means to you, and community means within the context of OCD treatment.
Yeah, and thanks for starting with the personal question on that. What community means to me. I mean, it's such an important facet of life in just everything. So my day-to-day life, actually one of the posts that I'm working on today is reflecting on the support behind the scenes that I have. So people will hear me on a podcast, they see a post, they see me in the clinical office, but they don't see all those supports behind the scenes. And I was specifically thinking of my wife, Emily, today, and pointing that out as we're celebrating our, yes, we still do this 9 years later, our engage-iversary, 9 years of being engaged. But I was thinking about it, and it's like, yeah, like she doesn't get that credit that so much of what I do and what I am goes back to all that support behind the scenes. Maybe that's emotional, maybe that's conversational, affection, all the things that help. And ultimately, even though she's a big source of that, it's not the only source. That my church community, my supportive, actually recovery community as well in my life, and so on and so forth, are just so important. So, do I have a personal stake in this? Yes. Yeah. Do I still stay objective with clients? Yeah, always working towards that, and do. But on the side for treatment, speaking more on the clinical side of that, especially when it comes to OCD and anxiety treatment, I haven't yet come across any sort of, use the word manualized approach. So there's a strong evidence base for the role of community and supports in recovery outcomes. And this ranges from different medical conditions, medical, right? Yeah, brain stuff, it's medical too, but the cancer treatment and supports. So for example, clients will come in and talk about going as a family to a cancer camp with a kiddo to support each other, and siblings go and they're there. And we see this in the literature with recovery from drugs and alcohol, but then there's a paucity in the literature and the research towards this when it comes to things like OCD and anxiety. And the reality is, some people may not need that to get really great outcomes, and a lot of people don't, in fact. Some people desperately need it, I believe. And the reality is, I think it can benefit everyone.
All right. I mean, well, first off, congratulations on your engage-iversary.
Thank you. 9 years. We've been married 8 years.
Okay. So, I mean, this is a good time. I was going to say, if I were to celebrate that, we got engaged on September 11th. So it's a more somber day, but not 2001. It was a lot later. But either way, yours sounds like a lot more fun.
It was a fun day.
Yes, but all right. So you've talked about like there's evidence for and structures for community for these other things, but not really a discussion for community and the inclusion of family or whatever somebody is defining as their community for OCD and anxiety treatment. I suppose why do you suppose that is? If you could speculate, I'm asking you to speculate here. Unless you know the answer.
No, certainly don't have the answer with it. I don't know. So I will say this. So I'll speak towards OCD specifically.
Okay.
OCD is a particularly isolating condition. Not to say it's the most, it's definitely not the least. I don't know where, but throughout history, as we study it, and even before, like pre-clinical history, so prior to Freud, prior to so on and so forth, it was written about, and part of what was written about was a concept that we call now preservation of insight. People who had it or people who were observing it would talk about the oddity of people suffering with these thoughts that would keep repeating, but they were rational enough to realize they were ridiculous, and yet they couldn't stop it. And this was so noted that when the medical literature came along, there was a term called partial insanity, because everything was insanity if a person didn't appear stable. It's not the terms we use today, but it was labeled partial insanity. I think a French psychiatrist, J.E.D. Esquirel, was maybe one of the first to label this. And so I think of it kind of historically, well before our current diagnostic nomenclature. Like we've had a really good sense that the person feels torn up by how ridiculous the obsessions appear to be most of the time. They have that insight. And there's a lot of shame. Depression is super common. Shame is super common. And I don't think most people do not experience a lot of shame or whether it's internalized or externalized, for saying, hey, I have PTSD. Or even a phobia. People kind of get that sometimes, or generalized worries. A lot of times people are just like, yeah, me too, or whatever else. And while people say that inappropriately with OCD, like, oh yeah, me too, the reality is when we actually get into the details of that, it is a shame-generating disorder left and right. So I can't say that this is the reason for possibly not getting in community as much, but it probably doesn't help.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's so much shame involved with. I think the vast majority of my clients who are suffering with OCD or are living with OCD also experience a certain amount of shame, on a wide spectrum. And you mentioned it's isolating. I think that's a really yes, it's certainly isolating, and a lot of people just feel like they suffer alone with it. Or we've all seen people, or all perhaps have known somebody who, can kind of hold it together when they're out in public. They go to school, go to work, even are in relationships with people and can hold it together. But then once they are home and alone or in their safe spaces, they can, let their hair down, as it were, kind of let out and give into some of their compulsions. Further, sending this message that they are isolated, their true self is alone. So if we were to incorporate community into treatment, and it sounds like you've also incorporated community into treatment with some of your clients, what does community look like, and what can someone benefit from including community within their treatment?
Yeah, what does community look like? So I think it's broad and varied. So some people automatically might feel afraid of, what does that look like? And I have no presupposition about exactly what that has to look like for clients walking in. Sometimes it's going to be more obvious, where getting involved in something supportive related to OCD, going to conferences, international conference or state conferences and so forth. OCD SoCal is been a part of that in these past few years with moving to virtual, have gotten to speak some great programming. So I think that those are some of the great ways that it looks like that many times. And it's truly a range. Like, I think, I don't have it in front of me. I want to go for the dictionary definition, but I'll lean into my own imperfection here. I think community at its most basic level is connection with another person in a meaningful way. And that really can even be a passing conversation. Many clients will say, hey, like I surprised myself. A coworker opened up about anxiety or OCD or even something else. And because I've done just a little bit of this work, or I've done a lot of this work, I was able to, in that moment, say, hey, just want you to know, actually, I'm in therapy for obsessive compulsive disorder, for generalized anxiety disorder, for XYZ. And that's community right there. And maybe it's a 5-minute conversation, 10-minute conversation. Clients who say people opened up more because they self-initiated that. Those are small and big examples alike of that. And certainly at higher and higher levels, people can be really open with their stories and become the advocates. Jump on a podcast with Kevin Foss and any number of other folks. So I think it's really broad and varied. Now, I'm happy, I'll take a pause, so I'm not just monopolizing the time. I'm happy to flesh out other more specific ways. But as to community and what that can look like, it is broad and varied, and it really starts super simple, just connecting with another person.
Yeah, I like that. I like the idea of thinking about community in this kind of a spectrum or gradation, because when I hear the word community, my brain immediately goes to groups of people, large groups of people.
Yep. Or group therapy.
Group therapy can be part of that, right? But and I think that would, again, fits within that. Sure. I mean, my association is, it's like, all right, it's your nuclear family, it's your church community, it's your school community, it's your coworkers, it's like your weirdo neighbor across the way. It's your community. And that's maybe one definition, but it can go all the way down to just, as you said, that singular person, that person that you meet, the person that you know that you are communicating with and sharing something with and expressing some vulnerability with, or at least just being together in something and on something, and everything in between. And so I think that when, if someone's a little hesitant to, listen to this podcast and think about, well, in order to have recovery from OCD, I've got to tell everybody I know, and I've got to be, the most transparent person, and that, the Instagram person who's talking about their anxiety on a day-to-day basis. And it's not true. It can be as simple as curating that the people and the small groups of people with whom you let in. That's an excellent observation. I'm really glad you said that, because of a lot of those hesitations that naturally come up. And even for those that don't have a disorder, if they're not super connected in a community, just hearing that term can frighten a lot of folks. Right. And so when you're working with someone and talking with them about community, and you get to that point in treatment where you're saying, hey, let's start incorporating some of your community, how is that conversation broached, and how is it in a sense sold? Right? Because some people need some coaxing, some convincing to bring people into the process, especially if that element of shame is there. Like, why would I be vulnerable to share this with somebody else if this is the worst and the scariest and the most terrifying thing that I've ever talked about? And gosh, I know I'm rambling here, but I've been that person where I'm the first person that person is told about their fears. That's right. That's right. So what's the selling point? What's that conversation like about incorporating other people? Yeah, for $399.95 and 4 payments of, I will get you into community today of your choosing. No. Listeners, look out. If this therapy business doesn't work out, I mean, Carnival Barker is up your alley. It sounds great. Yeah, exactly. Here's the greatest thing about the community. Actually, the best elements of community are always going to be free. Anybody who's charging for authentic connection, human connection, that's Are you picking on the sorority and fraternity community right now? I didn't say nothing. Okay. All right. I didn't hear nothing. Okay. So it's the best community is free. The best community is who you know. How does one start to incorporate that? Yep. The how. So what does this look like in a lot of sessions? I mean, first of all, clients, listeners have a bunch of ideas, and sometimes it's just starting to move, towards that direction, trying a little bit more. Some people are really well connected as well, and don't necessarily have to do something more as well. But in sessions, there's a lot of things that begin to touch on community. So first of all, client comes and it's young adults living at home or child, obviously going to be working with the parents. And those are really quickly accessible ways, or the person who's married or has a significant other, a partner, really quickly. I'm already, for the type of work that I do, encouraging folks to be thinking about, most of the time, 90% of cases, 85% of cases, saying, hey, if you'd ever like to invite your loved one in here, if they're not already, do you want to? Could we do that? Because if we're treating a thing that helps to have more support, there's a whole kind of system to it. You want to decrease accommodations of compulsions or help decrease those safety behaviors, then let's get that person in, and sooner rather than later.
And some people are really quick with that. Some people are really slow, and some people just really don't want to. And a lot of times there can be a lot of choice, sometimes not. So a lot of choice would be, a lot of times that maybe adult clients that they're able to buy into the treatments and by and large set up those things in their life, both internally and externally, in a helpful way for their recovery. But in a really obvious sense, sometimes when, even if it's that young adult client who's experiencing more, quote, failure to launch, they may have so many struggles or even more resistance towards working on compulsions that getting that community participating and showing up when it's indicated to do so is really, really helpful to help them break through. So kind of expanded upon that, but in a simple sense, that's going to come up naturally for me, at least, when it comes down to, hey, what do you need to get this therapy done? Mm-hmm. How can I get you in and out of here? And then also, if you want to stay a little bit longer, how can we connect even more with meaning in your life and the things that are important? Because most everyone at the end of the day is going to say on their top list of things of what matter is not necessarily the clothes, the cardigans that we wear as sweaters as therapists, or the money, the cars. Is going to be the people. And so, hey, how can we integrate, intersect? And those who are familiar with the ACT model, acceptance and commitment therapy, know implicitly that community is going to be really central, at least as a question, towards identifying one's values. So, these can be pretty natural conversations in therapy.
Right. So let's say there's someone out there who's wondering about the, is still hung up on the why of mm-hmm. community, right? That mm-hmm. It's my OCD, it's my anxiety. Mm-hmm. I should be the one who takes care of it, who works with it mm-hmm. and fixes it, and I don't want to be a burden on my partner, my parents, my fill in the blank. How do you address that hesitancy? For someone who thinks it's all on their shoulders and community isn't really going to get them anywhere.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. That's really insightful question. So two things. One would be overall values and beliefs. We'll comment about that. And second of all, motivational interviewing and some of the ACT work. So in my experience, most clients come to me with, at least on paper, the desire to be at a certain place in relationships, intimacy, etc. And this is where from the standpoint of religious beliefs, worldview, even non-religious beliefs, philosophically, I'll use the term that's very broad of worldview. Most people are going to come in with a good list of things that they can at least state that they would like to accomplish. So let's just take intimacy, for example. If a person says, I really dislike how me feeling uncertain and then feeling the need to compulse gets in the way of my love life. I'm really tired of asking my significant other for reassurance, and they're getting tired of it too. And I love them. I want them to be free of that too. I want to be free of this too, and I haven't been able to break free. And with ROCD, this is going to be really, really key, of course. But across the board, it can be tiresome for everyone, even if it's contamination OCD. And so most people are already going to have something, in my experience, on paper of I desire an authentic relationship with my spouse, where they know my highs and lows. Doesn't mean every word, every second, every thought, but maybe they know the big picture things that I can ask for help when I need it. I think most people have come across to have some version of something like that. And then they may also have, from a a spiritual standpoint, some goals of I want to be interconnected with others. I want to get outside of my own thoughts and help others, to serve other people. And I realized that I need to get out of my own thoughts to be able to do that, and actually to share some of my suffering sometimes, to invite other people into recovery. And that's actually pretty inherent in a lot of spiritual models and from a religious standpoint. So the first answer to that, I think, is, does a person already have something in place? Let's identify that, and then really look at it just like anything else. Like, where are the gaps in that, and how can I, as a therapist, assist that person in living that out? I'll talk about the motivational interviewing piece here in a second for less of the desired change, but didn't know if you had anything with that.
No. One of the things that you mentioned, I think, is pivotal in this, is that, and when I'm talking with clients about how to bring in other people and how to bring in loved ones and whoever, is I say it's your story to tell.
That's right. That's right.
You get to control what information gets out, right? You're your own PR person. So if, it can just be the headline of what's going on. And it can be a veiled headline. It can be as simple as, gosh, I've got anxiety. Right. And it can be, and underneath it could be, the next level can be, I've got OCD, which is a little bit more detailed, but it's not the nitty gritty of every single feared thought and, taboo story that's running through your mind, or that thing that feels like it makes you the worst or the most blasphemous or the most whatever. We get to choose the depth of information that we're going to share with that person. And we share more with people that have shown themselves to be trustworthy with that information. So, we don't share everything with our neighbor who we know is a blab and is a non-supportive of people with mental health. You don't need to share anything with them, but perhaps with your loved one, if they've shown themselves to be trustworthy with very intimate, vulnerable information, they get the privilege of hearing more. And that's they are closer in your circle. Kind of think about concentric circles of community. They are tighter in to who you are. So that's one element that I share with clients is you control the narrative on your story.
That's right. Yeah, and as I'm talking about a lot of the positives and the support for, and even just in other disorders or challenges of life, how we'll look at the role of community, and so encouraging it as well with OCD and anxiety. I'm really glad that you're bringing back to some of those other important principles, or not other, but similar principles of the healthy boundaries, healthy sharing. Sometimes sharing is a hierarchical item. Sometimes not sharing is the hierarchical item.
Also a very good point.
and the trust piece is huge. And I'm writing a book right now. I don't know if you know that. So in the book, I'm looking to, it always depends on what the publisher says, looking to dedicate a chapter on community. And a big part of it that I want to make sure to address is the trust piece. And there are a lot of people who've been burned so terribly in sharing and opening up. And so while I am very positive on the role of community, there's also nuance. There's the considerations to make. And so it doesn't mean automatically like, oh, okay, so you're married, absolutely, bring your spouse in. There are plenty of situations that I work with that's not wise immediately, or communicating it as the person sees it at that moment, or how they know to communicate it. I might say, okay, well, hold on, this is, we might want to take a session and flesh that out as far as how you would communicate that. Or you said prior that that loved one just went off on you last time. You said you were having a hard time and you needed to compulse. You wish that you didn't, but you had to, and they yelled at you. They screamed at you. Okay, like is that a pattern? Like let's talk about this. So just to be really clear, the breaks, there is appropriate discernment, and you said that so well a second ago.
Right. Yeah. There are going to be those times that we don't bring that person in, right? I think that, within some of these conversations, we always think about okay, how do I get community? How do I bring people in? There are going to be times that we choose not to, and there are going to be people with whom people that we do not include for very strategic and thoughtful reasons. But some of that can be fleshed out with a therapist, but or with a friend who knows you, trusts you. Again, relying on your community to talk about who you're going to let into your community. It's a very exclusive club, I suppose.
Exactly. Which ironically is using your community. So.
Right. Do you have any stories that you could share about when people have included their community and what sort of impact that has had?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
No putting you on the
spot. No. So I think that some of the most obvious ones would be getting involved in the programming at the state and international level. So for me, generally, International OCD Foundation, OCD Texas, and there's a lot of other organizations as well. OCD Game Changers, for example, and even with peer recovery coaching. It's a little different than therapy. Therapy, it brings community. Therapy is relational. And so I want to validate anybody listening to know that, hey, that oftentimes is an exposure just to come into the therapist's office. It's facing a lot of unknown fears and uncertainty, and that's an aspect of community. We have literally legal and ethical limits of what that community looks like. And so it can only be something, not everything. Not going to fulfill every human need for social connection, obviously. So the examples would be when folks have heard another person share their story. It's not even them sharing their own story. They might not be ready. I would say that the peer recovery services has been really big for several clients. I've received some clients that they started with that. I also, as a clinician, specializing in OCD and anxiety disorders, will refer them to a peer recovery coach while we're in the middle of treatment. Why in the world isn't it either or? It's not. Sometimes people specifically need that connection with another person who's gone through it. And so, many people can fit into this. So thinking of how much, especially with some of those non-talked about themes, so P, OCD.
Yeah, the taboo ones.
Taboo themes, exactly. It has been remarkably meaningful for several of my clients to have that conversation with somebody that isn't the therapist, but they also have some of their own ethics, the peer recovery, and there have been some occasions where I've had clients say, hey, I'm in really solid recovery, and one of the ways that I want to give back is to make myself available. And we as clinicians, of course, have to do this ethically and be careful with it, but state laws may differ on this, but some clients have provided their phone number just as a free open door. And I've utilized that as well when somebody is struggling to say, hey, here's a person who may know a little bit of what you're going through. If you're interested, would you like to talk to them? And especially, I've actually got a handful of these folks who've made themselves available. And sometimes they're in the same industry as somebody else work-wise, or similar demographic, or some of those themes are the same. And so there are all some pretty neat, both of those, peer recovery, a literal phone call or connection, or also even just kind of in some of the advocacy efforts. If people show up and spend a little bit of time on those live streams or at an OCD walk event or conference, they can't help but notice, oh, here's this person saying something similar to me. And those are all some of the ways that I've seen a lot of great buy-in and a person walking away saying, oh, I'm not alone.
Right.
People usually know it theoretically, but just like with anything else that we do in therapy, it has to be done experiential.
Right. Well, I know that I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I want to find out just kind of near here at the very end. I wonder, is there anything else that you'd want to add to kind of give people some insight into what community could look like for them, how they can start to incorporate that, and maybe even what would be could you offer a challenge to folks who might be hesitant to do so, in what would be a good first step in reaching out?
Yeah, that's really good. Well, let me link it in as well with that second part that I didn't say, and I'll be very brief with this. Sometimes a person struggles naturally with the thought of having community, but if it's indicated clinically and in a most obvious sense, if it's on their hierarchy, this is a step that, they know, like, okay, one kind of simple example can be, a person has asked me directly, hey, you doing okay? And I'm close to that person. I want them to know technically, but I'm afraid I'll use motivational interviewing. Really just start where they are. It's a therapeutic technique that helps to really increase buy-in, look at actual motivation, but use a lot of, we call them Socratic questions to access what does the person truly care about. And so in kind of recommendations or challenge, I'm going to go back to questions. What is community to you? What would you like it to look like? Are there ways that you've seen community? And again, just simple definition of connecting with at least another person in a way that's meaningful, ways that's stood out. Are there ways that you would like to see that you aren't experiencing it now? And what's just a small, tangible thing to do with that? Practicing a lot of self-compassion and acceptance. It doesn't have to be somebody else's step. I'll use these big examples you had referenced to even just the advocacy. We see some great advocacy, and people are only a few years into recovery, and they're bearing their lives to everybody. That's going to be, frankly, that's pretty rare. But what is the step that helps you to connect with the heart of connection with someone else in a way that is meaningful? And then I suppose the challenge is just the kind of the inverse of that. Are you being honest with yourself where you are? Social psychology tells us in many ways that we as human beings aren't very good at following through with the things that we say would make us happy. We say that it's not money that really, maybe some money, sure. So it happens in all other aspects of psychology too. So are you by chance, and I ask this in a gracious way, because I do this, I've done this, I'll talk about being open and do therapy and then realize, oh my goodness, like I've been really upset about something and anxious. I haven't told a single person this in 2-3 weeks, whatever else. And so me too. But is there any self-deception in there that somehow you've got it, or you need to have it all by yourself, or that you're on point with your goals? But if you really, really sit down, would you say, I need a little more connection? Or maybe in the other side, maybe you need less connection. I don't know. That would be, I suppose, my challenge.
One of the things two of the things I really enjoyed in that, or I think that it's important, is the part that you said, like, what would I'm going to mess it up. But it was kind of this this element of like, I'm going to mess it up entirely. You're kind of engaging with this fictitious person and kind of their imagination of what would they like connection to look like, right? Like, if you could have connection in any sort of way, if it could be one step better than what it is what it currently is, what could that look like, right? I think that points to the choose your own adventure element of this. Community does not have to be this. Again, that my ridiculous association of it's got to be your neighbor and your cousin and your coworker and it can be who do you want it to be, and I suppose it can be as simple as it can be that person that you played Call of Duty with for the past 5 years that you've never met online. That could be one person, could be, and it's. And that could be part of your community, but if that's part of their imagination of what bringing someone in can be, great, we'll start there. And perhaps you included this element of like, what's one thing that you could do? Not how do you go from where you are right now to boom, community, you have it.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
That's right. I think this is certainly borrowed from ACT. It's what is one small step that you can do today to get you one step closer to your goal, not to get to the goal, but just the little thing. And it's like, all right, all right, I want to get a career in life. The first step is maybe fill out an application. That is not having your whole career. That is literally just one simple, small step towards that goal. So maybe it is just calling a friend, sending a text, right? Just sending, hey, someone you haven't reached out to in a while, or reaching out. What is that one small step? So considering what's even just the minute thing that you can do to move you closer in that direction. That's
right. Yeah, I love that. And sometimes the small step can be the text. Sometimes that is the really scary step for the person. And it's okay if I take 60 more seconds to personalize this okay.
Yes.
So we therapists can be very good at asking the questions, but to turn them on ourselves is a different story entirely.
And we're fine. What are you talking about?
So let me be the first to walk this through. What is one aspect of community that I'm lacking in today that I wish were a little bit more and is on mission, so to speak, with my values? And I would say that would be the friend connection piece. Right now, just this zone of life that I'm in, I'm very fulfilled and attentive towards time with my wife, my 2 little kids at home, extended family. It's just the zone that we're in. But I have really missed friendship recently, and there's been transitions this last year that has just led to a couple of folks that I was closer to not being able to have as much time with them. And so if I walk this through for myself, I would say that. If I look at it emotionally, I would have to say I felt a little lonely with that piece. And so what can I do? And Kevin, you can hold me accountable to this. I'm going to reach out, and I'm going to text. I have one friend of mine. His name's Matt, and I'm going to see. Sometime here, my brain's like, oh, it's so busy, Christmas season. You're trying to limit the things that you're doing. But here's what I'm going to do. There's no guarantees to when it's going to work out. He might be busy during the season too. I'm just going to be like, Matt, you know what? After my kids are down, can we hang? You want to go grab a burger? Let's do it. Hold me to it, Kevin.
I will message you about that. Is there a time frame in which that text is going to happen?
Give me maximum 1 week. I'm going to do it here when I get off.
All right, I'll hold you accountable to it. If you do it prior to the release of this episode, I will let everybody know. So we, as the Fearcast community, can hold you accountable to that. What I love about what you said is so indicative of an adult relationship. It's you said, hey, I'm going to reach out to my buddy. And it may not happen this week. It may not happen next week. It may not happen until after the holiday season. But I'm going to see him eventually. Sometimes we go, oh, I want to reach out to my community. Hey, can you do something tonight? Oh, they can't do it tonight? Well, then I'm host. I'm screwed. I'm not going to be able to hang out with anybody, and I'm going to be alone forever. So,
that's right.
Adult relationships, it's not like it was in the dorms where you just, go down the hallway and see who's there. It's sometimes, I have a really close buddy. His name is Jordan, and he's been on the podcast before. But I would consider him one of my best friends. and I see him like 4 times a year.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, I would consider him one of my closest buddies. And it's a gradation. Some people see their friends every stinking day. Some people don't. So we need to have a little bit of flexibility with that. But it just kind of shows this variation, perhaps, of what community can look like, and it can be different. So, so Justin, I know that we took all the time that we had allotted. So I appreciate your flexibility today on that. But if anybody has questions about community, could they reach out, and would you be willing to hop on again to talk about community?
Absolutely. Already just thinking with the time how much it's been both an honor, but a lot of fun. This has been just very easy to jump on with. I enjoy the conversation.
Awesome. Well, Justin Hughes, thank you so much for joining us, and have a good day.
You too. Thank you, Kevin.
Yep. All right, everybody, thank you for making it through that episode. If you have questions for Justin, or would like to expand on some of the information, or like him to expand on the information, or if you have some feedback for this episode, go over to fearcastpodcast.com, and you can click on the submit a question link and just send me that message over there. You can also send me that message again over Instagram, and I'll try to have Justin back on to have some response or share some of your feedback on the next episode. So everybody, please remember that the Fearcast is not a substitute for psychotherapy. If you need a little bit of help in your recovery, go over to Fearcast Podcast and click on the Find Help link, and there's going to be some information for you there. So everybody, until next time, take a risk, challenge yourself, and don't take your brain too seriously. Bye.